Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with the Week 5 edition of the Big Picks. We're going to go game by game in the Big Ten and predict a winner for every single Big Ten matchup this week. But before we get into the video itself, it's at this time I'd like to ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help me out if you did. And now, with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to do, and that's to get started. Starting with Washington at Rutgers. They actually play today, or tonight rather, on Friday. And this is a game that Vegas thinks is going to be low scoring and a very close matchup. They are higher on Rutgers than I am for some reason, or maybe they're lower on Washington than I am. I'm not particularly sure. Washington lost a rivalry game to an actually pretty decent Washington State team. Like, I think that's a good football team this year. I'm not that concerned about that loss. I think there's a very good possibility Washington can end up with 8 or 9 wins. Rutgers, I think, has a chance to make it to a bowl game, but I don't necessarily see this as a game that they have to win in order to get to that bowl game threshold that they really want to be at. Rutgers has gone 3-0, I think, for 3 straight years now. I think this is the third year on a streak of ending up 3-0, and I think they're 1-1 in terms of making a bowl game in those 3-0 starts. I just look at this and I think that Washington just has this Rutgers team overmatched. I think Washington is a team that might have the best running game in the Big Ten. Ohio State notwithstanding, of course. They're the best at basically everything in the Big Ten. And I actually believe Washington's defense is better than it was last year. Last year, if you really dig into the numbers and actually watch them play, their pass defense was actually really good. It was their run defense that was suspect. This year, they're much better in run defense, and the passing defense, I don't think, has fallen off all that much. I think it's gone from a borderline elite unit to a borderline great unit, like a good to great passing defense. I think the improvements to the run defense are going to be the difference in this game. Rutgers has also not particularly defended the run particularly well. And I just think this is a little bit of a mismatch, which is why I have Washington 31, Rutgers 17 as the final score. Rutgers is actually a 1.5 point favorite in this game. Now, that line very much concerns me. And kind of the same thing with Michigan and USC last week. That's a crazy line to me. And that suggests that Vegas knows something that I don't know. And usually when that happens, it's because Vegas knows something that I don't know. And the line is there for a reason. So I think there's a definitive possibility that Rutgers is going to win this game, even though I don't really see it from a matchup perspective. Washington has been very good passing the ball, and they've been explosive in the run game this year. They're averaging, I think, almost 5 yards a carry, regardless of who's running the football. The offensive line is still very, very good. Rutgers' offensive line has actually been fantastic this year, but I think that is in part due to the level of competition. But overall, I just don't think Rutgers has the level of athlete to be able to play with a team like Washington right now. Next game on the docket, Minnesota at Michigan. The line for this game is Michigan minus 9.5. The over-under is set at 38. That is a very, very low over-under. They do not think a whole lot of points are going to be scored in this game. And I get that Michigan is coming off of the big win against USC, and that was a big win. It was effectively a proof of concept for Sharon Moore. I think it's gotten some of his harsher critics to back off a little bit, myself included. However, this has trap/letdown game written all over it. I think if Michigan was a little bit of a better team and they were kind of expected to beat USC and then they win that game, I think this could have potentially been a trap game going up in a rematch against the national championship game with Washington in Seattle next week. That could have been a looking forward situation for Michigan where they were looking past Minnesota to that game. I don't think Michigan's looking past anybody right now, but this still has letdown game written all over it for me. Last week took a miracle for Michigan to win. If you go back and look at my video on this channel titled Just About Everything Went Wrong for Michigan, where I break down just how awful they looked the first 3 weeks of the year, well, basically none of that changed. I think the defense got better, but I think that had perhaps a little bit more to do with the fact that USC, for whatever reason, was hell-bent on running the football and just refused to pass the ball in the first half than it did to have to do with Michigan getting better. That being said, I do think the plan is for Khalil Mullings to end up getting the majority of carries going forward. I believe that's going to help the offense because Donovan Edwards just hasn't been good so far this year. He hasn't been awful, but he hasn't been the elite running back that we saw in the later half of the 2022 season when he started getting more consistent carries. He just hasn't been that guy. But nevertheless, I do think he's still an effective running back, and I think that this team has a solid-ish chance to go 9-3. Illinois is a very tough game. That's on the road, I believe. Washington on the road is a very tough game. Minnesota at home, this is going to be a tougher game than people realize for Michigan. It is a rivalry game. I'm not sure how motivated either side is by this rivalry game. Like, I don't think Minnesota gets up for Michigan the same that they would get up for Wisconsin or Iowa, and Michigan sure as fuck doesn't get up for Minnesota like they would get up for Michigan State or Ohio State. But it is still technically a rivalry game, and Minnesota, more so than USC at least, is more equipped to deal with what Michigan is going to do offensively in this game. I do think Michigan wins, but I think this is a close, grind it out, win game sort of situation for them. I think the final score ends up Minnesota 13, Michigan 17. I think this is going to be tremendously low scoring. I think this is going to be maybe Michigan can force a turnover, get a short field, and score a touchdown, and then that might be the difference in the game. I do not have a whole lot of faith or confidence that this is a team that is going to come out and look as good running the ball as they did last week, because I think Minnesota's defensive line is better than USC's defensive line, and I also think their linebacking core and just defense in general is better than USC's. However, when it comes to it, push or shove, I have more faith in Michigan's ability to do the things that they will have to do to win this game than I do Minnesota's. So I'm going to go with Michigan here, 17-13. Next game on the docket, Maryland at Indiana. The line for this game is spread at Indiana -7. The over-under is set at 52.5. They think this is going to be a middle kind of scoring game. They don't think it's going to be a high scoring game necessarily, but it's certainly not going to be a low scoring game either. And I tend to agree with that. I think Maryland is a bad football team. I think Indiana is a good football team. I think the spread should be higher than 7. That being said, it wouldn't be astonishing if Maryland won the football game. It would be a surprise to me. I think Indiana is a very solid football team that is not going to beat themselves. And Maryland has kind of shown that they do kind of beat themselves, or at least early on in the season. I actually think this game is going to be significantly higher scoring than the over-under would have you believe. I think that Maryland 24, Indiana 37 is a reasonable score for this game. I think Maryland is probably just as bad, if not maybe a little bit worse on defense than UCLA. However, I think they're significantly better offensively. So I think that Maryland is going to be able to move the ball, will probably be able to put some points on the board. However, I don't think they're going to be able to slow down Indiana all that much. I think offensively, Indiana is going to be able to do just about everything that they want to do, and I think they're going to win this game fairly easily. Next game up, Nebraska at Purdue. This is going to be another quick one here. I think Nebraska is going to come out and they're going to be pissed off from last week. Last week, it was its whole own can of worms, but Nebraska, I think, proved, to me at least, that they are a high-quality football team. I think because that's what I think Illinois is. And more so than anything else, Nebraska probably should have won the game. Like, I don't think you can watch that game and come away with the conclusion that Illinois is a better team than Nebraska. Now, I put Illinois ahead of Nebraska in my rankings video when I was ranking the Big Ten on Monday because Illinois beat Nebraska. However, if Dylan Raiola hits that wide open touchdown pass, Illinois loses the game in regulation by 7. So this is a kind of tough sort of situation with Nebraska because I think they're a good football team, but I'm not sure how good they are. And it really comes down to the consistency of Dylan Raiola. Purdue, if there's a Purdue fan watching this, sorry, you guys are ass. You're going to get ass blasted out of this game. My prediction is 28-6, and that might be a little bit generous. But Nebraska losing against Illinois isn't the end of the world for this team. Even if you only end up going 7-5 this year, that's not the end of the world because you have a true freshman quarterback who looks like a future number 1 pick in the draft. He's certainly got the talent for it. So this season is not about winning games. Now, you're going to win games because you're a good football team. But this season is not about getting to the Big Ten championship. It's about letting Dylan Raiola figure some shit out. And you're going to have opportunities against ranked teams going forward, notably Ohio State. But just remember, this is a team getting ready for next year, at least in my opinion. Next game here, we got a slew of quick ones going on here. Wisconsin at USC. The line is USC minus 15.5. I don't think that's big enough. The over-under is 51. I don't think that's high enough. Wisconsin has looked very bad this year. They look like the same team that they were last year. Even when they had Tyler Van Dyke at quarterback, they looked like the same team that they were last year, and that was a team that barely got to a bowl game. And USC is tremendously improved from last year. I don't think you can watch USC versus Michigan and come away with the conclusion that Michigan is a better football team than USC. USC is still a contender to get to the Big Ten championship game. They aren't a contender to win it, in my opinion, but they're a contender to get there. I've got USC 42, Wisconsin 10. I just don't really see a path to victory for Wisconsin. I think they're staring down the barrel of a USC team that is honestly kind of pissed off that they lost last week. They had no business losing last week. And I think they're going to come out and, not make a statement because you can't make a statement against a Wisconsin team this bad. But they're going to come out and handle business. That's what I think is going to happen. Moving on to one of the more interesting matchups this week, in my opinion, Ohio State at Michigan State. Michigan State is currently a home dog of 23.5 points. And the over-under is set at 48. I don't know what to think of this game. I think this game is going to go one of two ways. I think either Ohio State is going to come out and knock the doors off of Michigan State like they did in, 2021 when it was 49-0 at halftime. The game finished like 56-0. That could absolutely happen. Or Ohio State's going to win like 24-14. I think there's a definitive possibility that those are the two things that are going to happen. It's going to be one of those two things. I don't think it's going to be like a 38-10 kind of game where Ohio State took their foot off the gas pedal towards the end and they could have scored more points. No, I think Ohio State needs to come out and obliterate everybody, especially a Michigan State team that is significantly better than a lot of people believed them to be coming into this game. Michigan State did also lose a close game to Boston College last week, so there might be a little bit added motivation for Michigan State. And another thing is that when you're a top 5 team in the country like Ohio State and you're playing a team with a new head coach that's traditionally been very, very good, this could be a statement game. A statement that, oh, Michigan State's back. They're a real football team. Okay? I think they made that statement against Boston College last week because I have a very high opinion on Boston College. I think they're a very good football team. They might be the 3rd best team in the ACC. Now, to get in the nitty-gritty of this game here a little bit, I don't actually think Ohio State is going to dictate how this game goes. I think they're going to be able to do basically whatever they want to do on offense for the most part. The real question to me is Michigan State's offensive line as good as they have looked early on in the season? Because Ohio State is by far the best defensive line they've played. I don't think Michigan State's going to be able to run the football outside of like quarterback scrambles and stuff like that. This game is probably going to come down to if Childs can get the turnovers under control. If he throws 3 picks, they're losing 50-0. Okay, it's just a fact of reality with this type of team that Ohio State is. Now, that being said, if he doesn't turn the ball over, which he's also had some problems with fumbles, but if he doesn't throw interceptions and fumble the football, Michigan State might have a decent chance to make things interesting. And again, you never know. Michigan State might come out and bring their A game, and Ohio State might get caught flat-footed thinking they're going to come in and bulldoze this team, which honestly, they probably should be thinking that, because ultimately that's what I think is going to happen. I think Michigan State gets 1 or 2 drives where they can maybe put up some points, and I think Ohio State is going to run away with this thing. There's a definitive possibility it's going to be a 4 or 5 touchdown lead at halftime for this game. I just don't trust Childs' ability to not turn the ball over. I think Ohio State is going to be able to create turnovers, and I think that Childs is going to give them plenty of opportunities to make plays. And I think this game is going to get ugly very quickly. Moving on to, without a doubt, the biggest game of the week, Illinois at Penn State. Regardless of conference, this is the biggest game, maybe of the whole season, being played this week. It's Illinois at Penn State. I don't think there's anybody else that's playing this week that is even remotely as interesting that could peel my eyes away from the 7:30 kickoff of Illinois and Penn State. No, but in all seriousness, this is a big game. Penn State cannot afford to lose this game. They can't. And this is going to be a game. I think that line is ridiculous, flat out and straight up. I think if the line moved 10 points in Illinois' favor, it would still be ridiculous. Illinois is a very good football team. They are a team that will not beat themselves. And more often than not, if you're not going to beat yourself, you're going to win the game, because the other team is probably going to beat themselves. They have a history of doing so in the case of Penn State. Penn State beats themselves maybe more than any other Big Ten team that legitimately is a very good program. Like, they beat themselves a lot, and they have been remarkably inconsistent on both sides of the football this year. Plus, their defensive coordinator, who's been calling plays, is no longer going to be calling plays. He's reportedly handing the headset off to somebody else this week. So I don't know maybe what the defense is going to look like. I do think the defense is significantly worse than it was last year, but I think the offense is significantly better. I think this game is either going to be a shootout or the kind of game that feels like a shootout but isn't. My gut tells me that Penn State's going to win, and that's why I've got the score 24-17 Penn State. I just got to go with the gut a little bit on this. But Illinois could absolutely win this game. They've got two NFL caliber wide receivers, an NFL caliber quarterback, and an offensive line that plays well. Defensively, they've got some guys at all three levels. Penn State also has a ton of NFL talent everywhere. This is a real football team in Illinois playing a real football team in Penn State. This is going to be a good, classic Big Ten style of game. However, when push comes to shove, I just think Penn State's going to be able to, with their level of talent, come away with a victory in a hard-fought game. Final game is a quick one. Oregon at UCLA. Spread is 25.5, over under 55.5. I think Oregon covers and almost hits the over by themselves. I think Oregon figured it out against Oregon State, and I think this is a team that is getting close to being the team that we all thought they were going to be when we put them in that top 5 kind of conversation to begin the year. Northwestern and Iowa are the two teams on byes this week. That's why I didn't mention them at all. So I'm going to use this time to recap my picks. I have Washington over Rutgers. I have Michigan over Minnesota. I have Indiana over Maryland. I have Nebraska over Purdue. I have USC over Wisconsin, Ohio State over Michigan State, Penn State over Illinois, and Oregon over UCLA. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. At this point, I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.